So I will be discussing RSP during our ZOO 148 class last year under Ma'am Jude, entitled Assessing the Climate Change Vulnerability of Some of the Philippine Endemic Mammals. So let's start with acknowledgement. I just want to thank Ma'am Jude for her opinions or criticisms, and to Wild Folks, of course, and to my IH family, and to Kuya Flor for his laptop. Okay, so let's start. Imagine the Earth without a tarsier. Imagine the world, the universe rather, without a rodent, a cloud rat for example. By the end of the century, animals may be gone from the face of the Earth, and the culprit, human-induced climate change. So, what exactly is climate change? You can actually find hundreds of definitions for a single term, all have the same thought, just like this. Alteration of the constitution of the Earth's atmosphere, which may be directly or indirectly influenced by man. So, what causes climate change? There are lots of them. But we can divide the causes into two, natural and anthropogenic. So let's take a look at these scenarios, for example. A volcanic eruption is an example of natural cause of climate change. During a volcanic eruption, large amount of sulfur dioxide is released during the process. The effect, displacement of affected families around the vicinity of the volcano. This picture of Mount Pinatubo on 1991 is the second largest volcanic eruption in the Earth for the 21st century. Another natural cause is wildfire. For example, this picture is a wildfire from Mount Apo during 2016. And another natural cause is methane emission from the livestock industry. So because we depend on livestock for our foods, and a cow does an average release between 70 and 120 kilograms of methane per year. Methane is a greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide, but the negative effect is times 23 compared to CO2. Let's now move on for the anthropogenic cause of climate change. We have here the deforestation. Of course, kailangan ko bang i-memorize yan? Another anthropogenic cause, increasing number of vehicles. Kitang-kita naman po anong problema sa picture na yun. Yeah, increasing number of vehicles is one example of anthropogenic cause of climate change. And according to the IPCC, the level of CO2 in the atmosphere is approximately 400 parts per million, and it's an all-time high considering the CO2 level in the atmosphere had never been above this line for centuries. That is why they conclude that scientific evidence for warming of the climate system is unequivocal, meaning it is certain, it is sure. Ayan. So, sa mundong walang kasiguraduhan, walang sure, puro baka sakali, may isang sure, climate change. So, where does the Philippines stand? After looking climate change through the global scale, it is nice to ask, where does the Philippines stand? This figure shows the CO2 emissions per country, and the United States is leading the tally. Oh, tally. Ayan. You can see the Philippines here having minimum amount of CO2 emissions compared or relative to the other bigger countries, just like the US. Therefore, we can actually say that even if the Philippines stops emitting CO2, there will be little effect on global warming because this 0.9 CO2 emission is somehow negligible compared to other countries. So how is climate change affecting the Philippines? According to the Global Climate Risk Index on 2015, Philippines is listed as the #1 most affected country by climate change using 2013's data. So what's going on? Is the Philippines simply unlucky? Well, not exactly. The Philippines has long been particularly vulnerable to extreme weather. This is because of its location. The Philippines is located at Western Pacific Ocean, surrounded by naturally warm waters that will likely to get even warmer as average sea surface temperature continues to rise. The Philippines also lack natural barriers, so there's nothing stand between them and the ocean. Of course, aside from mangroves and coral reefs, which is actually been the issue today because there's been actually deforestation in mangroves, which is actually another issue for today. So due to climate change, extreme flooding has been experiencing all over the country. And with headlines like this, you know something is wrong. So Philippines, as we all know, is one of the 17 mega-diverse countries. And that the Philippines is one of the few nations that is in its entirety both a biodiversity hotspot and a mega-diversity country, placing it among the top priority hotspots for global conservation. So Philippines boasts 12,000 plant and 1,100 land vertebrate species. Most of these vertebrates are endemics. The reason behind this is the wide range of microenvironments and growing conditions at varying altitudes found within the Philippine Islands. And according to the IUCN report on 2014, over 1,400 endangered species are threatened by a disrupted climate. The Philippines is ranked as having the most severely endangered endemic wildlife in the world. Its forests are being lost and degraded at an astonishing rate. Actually, species can somehow adapt to sudden changes in its environment, but they can only take so much. Napapagod din naman mag-adjust yung mga hayop, di ba? Kahit naman sa atin, pati yung mga tao, di ba, kapag sobra na, nakapagod din mag-adjust. Yan. Yung dadaan. Okay, for the endemism of the Philippines, let's compare the Brazil and the Philippines. For total land area, of course, as we all know, Brazil having larger total land area compared to the Philippines. But when it comes to endemism, non-endemic species outnumber the endemics in Brazil, which is a very different case in the Philippines where endemics outnumber the non-endemics. It is now safe to say that Philippines is richer in terms of endemicity rate rather than Brazil. However, endemics are more prone to extinction. Why? Because of its narrow geographic ranges. Let's take, for example, a tamaraw, which is only confined in Mount Igitbaco in Mindoro. Another example, endemics are small number in populations. For example, Ilandok. And third, endemics need for specialization of ecological niches, just like a tertiary. According to the BMP report on 2014, there are 231 species of mammals in the Philippines, and 130 of which are endemic. And of course, numbers are increasing with discoveries of new species. Analysis of the distribution patterns of the Philippine land mammals suggests that 4 major faunal regions may be identified on the basis of species richness, composition, and degree of endemism. But let's focus more on the 3 greater area, the Luzon, Palawan, and Mindanao. Sierra Madre Mountain Range is considered as the largest remaining tract of old-growth tropical rainforest in the Philippines. It extends from Cagayan Valley down to Quezon Province and considered as the backbone of the northern island of Luzon. The Sierra Madre contains 1.4 million hectares of forest, representing 40% of the country's forest cover. However, there are threats to this area, particularly deforestation, illegal logging, and road construction. So, for Palawan faunal region, we have small-scale illegal logging because, as we all know, implementations in Palawan is more strict than other area in the Philippines. There are also conversion of forest into plantation and trading, of course. And for the Mindanao faunal region, Eastern Mindanao has been dubbed the timber and mining corridor of the Philippines, and these operations constitute the largest threats to the area's biodiversity. This picture is an illegal logging in Butuan, and the other one is mining in Surigao. There are other causes of biodiversity loss. It includes deforestation, invasive species, pollution, overexploitation, and of course, the main issue for today, climate change. All of these 5 causes are interrelated with each other, one being the result of the other one. The main issue for today is the climate change. So what are the objectives of our study? First and foremost, the study aimed to assess climate change vulnerability of some of the Philippine endemic mammals and to identify the trends in the prevalent causes of climate change vulnerability specific to the Philippines and Philippine endemic mammals with emphasis on bats and rodents. Preliminary, I just want to stress out the word preliminary index in assessing Philippine endemics. So some glitches may be inevitable. So for the methods, we assessed the future climate change vulnerability of 32 species of endemic Philippine mammals. Of these, 23 were rodents, 8 were insectivorous bats, and 1 was a primate. So once you type NatureServe CCBI in Google tab, it's the first thing that will pop up. It's a free software-ish or an application or an index, and the best thing about this is it is free to download, so it is really convenient to use. You can download this index from that website, www.natureserve.org/climate-change. And you might be asking, why only 32 species? Because I just want to stress out again that this is just a 1/4 of the whole assessment conducted by the whole class of the 0148. So divided by 4 groups. So NatureServe CCBI and index actually composed of four parts. So the section A to D. So the package comes with a manual and an Excel sheet. Once you've opened the spreadsheet, you'll see 4 different sections. And you need to supply all the needed information first. This index uses a scoring system which takes into account direct and indirect exposure to climate. So section A looks like this. To start the assessment, we need to first take into consideration the species' exposure to local climate change and the future predictions of temperature and moisture. And according to the climate wizard, the entire Philippines have less than 2.2 degrees Celsius change. So in this area, for the severity in temperature, we actually chose the 2.2 degrees Celsius because according to related literature, it is the change that will occur in the Philippines in the next few decades. And for the migratory moisture metric, ayan, this is where it becomes tricky. We need to assume where we place our X there. For example, because according to the literature, extreme heat and extreme rain will continue to happen. Yeah, will continue to happen in the Philippines. So extreme rain and extreme dryness. So nag-equate lang sila, parang, so we chose the 0.028 degree of moisture metric. For the migratory exposure, it's actually optional. So we did not supply any information for that. Section B looks like this. It deals with the indirect exposure of climate change of the species. For example, the sea level rise, natural barriers, anthropogenic barriers, and impact of land use changes from human responses to climate change. As we all know, sea level rise is significant to an archipelagic country like the Philippines. Same with the barriers and land use changes are numerous in the Philippines. So, having said that, we actually check the mark the great increase part. For the section C, for this part, we reviewed available literature for each of the 32 species, their distributions and habitats, and scored them appropriately to the best of our knowledge. Data were primarily obtained from Heaney's Synopsis of Philippine Mammals and supplemented with data from other sources. It's like scoring system. And for the last section, it's actually optional, so you can actually skip this part. So I just want to stress out, CCBI is meant to be separate but complementary to their conservation status. So as we all know, each species have their own status in the IUCN. So I just want to stress out that it is not always have to be complementary with the IUCN status. Our results may vary, but that doesn't mean that actually they're not related with the IUCN status. And after supplying all the information needed from section A to section C, then we'll arrive to this part where we'll actually tell what status the species actually assessed. So results may be extremely vulnerable, highly vulnerable, moderately vulnerable, and less vulnerable. If there are deficiencies of information, it is classified as IE or insufficient evidence. So the results. Let's now move on to the results. Out of the species of rodents, there are 8 species assessed was moderately vulnerable. 1 species of bats was moderately vulnerable also, and the sole primates, the tertiary, is moderately vulnerable. For rodents, we have 13 species scored, assessed, were less vulnerable. 6 were less vulnerable for bats also. And for the insufficient evidence, we have 2 for rodents and 1 for bats. So let's now focus on the moderately vulnerable species. For example, we have here the Philippine forest roundleaf bat, or the Ecosideros obscurus. It scored moderately vulnerable in the CCBI assessment. However, we also have the insufficient evidence here, the orange-fingered Myotis, or the Myotis group of pictures, because no data is available. For the primates, as we all know, the tertiary, the sole primate in the group, is moderately vulnerable. For the order Rodentia, under family Shuridae, we have here the Palawan flying squirrel or the Hylopetes nigripes, moderately vulnerable. We also have the Suntasurus muellendorfi or the Cullion tree squirrel as moderately vulnerable. And for the family Muridae, we have here the Mindoro climbing rat as moderately vulnerable. And the Camiguin forest mouse also with moderately vulnerable status. And lastly, the large Mindoro forest mouse also assessed as moderately vulnerable. So sea level rise had relatively low impact on climate change vulnerability for bats, which are not cave obligates and endemic rodents in high elevations. Cave dweller bats won't be affected that much during sea level rise because of the fact that they are thriving in an enclosed area, unlike those species that are roosting in a tree. This is true with the Philippine pygmy roundleaf bat. Moreover, relatively few species are affected by natural and anthropogenic barriers. So there were few anthropogenic barriers, as the endemic species were mostly found away from the area, such as cities, which could be considered as a barrier. Though there are areas that there are energy plants and plants for future plants, this increases their vulnerability to climate change as well. Most prevalent causes for vulnerability in the endemic bats assessed were found to be the narrow historical thermal and hydrologic niche of the species. For rodents, historical thermal and hydrologic niche of the species similarly increased the vulnerability for the most. As well as for the tarsier, it is similarly most affected by its narrow historical thermal and hydrologic niche as well as the threat posed by increased disturbance. So what does it mean? The narrow thermal and hydrologic niche means that this species is not used in the changes happening in its environment. Thermal deals with the temperature, while hydrologic deals with the precipitation changes. The species was used to be in one specific area and that it couldn't handle a slight change. That's why it's called narrow thermal and hydrologic niche. Human invasion of tertiary habitats can cause habitat fragmentation and deforestation, can increase the exposure of tertiary habitat to clearings, and change in ecology may affect the diversity and numbers of insect prey items available to tertiaries. This change in ecology may affect the diversity and numbers of insect prey items available to tertiaries. An example, diversity and density of large orthopterans, which is the main diet of a tertiary, may decrease as forest habitat fragments decrease in size as seen in some beetle species. So for the conclusion, after the assessment of 32 Philippine endemic mammals with respect to climate change vulnerability, results shows that 19 of them were less vulnerable and 10 of them were moderately vulnerable. For the 3 of them, there was insufficient evidence to obtain a vulnerability status. The specific cause of climate change vulnerability include the narrow hydrological and thermal ranges that the species experience. And based on the results, the threat of climate change to the Philippines, mammals should not be taken for granted. The absence of extremely vulnerable species should not assure us, as many other factors are present, that threaten or endemic species other than climate change. So, porket hindi tayo nakapag-arrive sa extremely vulnerable na status ng species, sabihin safe na sila sa climate change. Porket hindi mo nakikita, wala na. So, dahil hindi mo nakikita, hindi mo napapansin. Recommendations: strict implementation of management protocols in protected areas. Ayan. To obtain more accurate results in the climate change vulnerability of the species, we suggest reassessing this species when further studies have been conducted regarding the species habitat and ecology. And further studies regarding climate change vulnerability in the country on more species and taxonomic groups would be very helpful in adapting appropriately to the changing climate and conserving our wildlife. Because, as what I have mentioned earlier, this is just a preliminary study. The first trial to use the index, then it is highly recommended to take this research into the next level. For example, to include all the Philippine endemic mammals. So the bottom line, climate change. Climate change is real, it is happening right now. The question is it too late for us to stop climate change? Maybe yes or maybe no, depending on the person, diba? But there's no time like the present to start changing our ways. For the next generations, for our children, for our children's children. So let us not take this planet for granted. Thank you.